Hey there, it's Reuben Curé with another sketching video.
You might find yourself at the water's edge late in the afternoon when the sun is shining on the sea and making it sparkle and shimmer and leaving no colour whatsoever on the surface of the water. Well, that's what happened to me when I was at the shore recently, and I had my inks and watercolours with me, and I didn't have much in the way of specialist equipment like masking fluid pens or anything like that to block off the watercolour. So I did what I could with the tools that I had, and I ended up really enjoying myself. It didn't take too long to stay. It didn't take too long. I'm having a reluctant extra here at the moment, so he's a good boy. But anyway, it's a bit of a step-by-step. Reuben, is it that you want to see that? Is that what it is? No, clearly isn't. And I hope you enjoy watching me paint this, and I hope it gives you a couple of ideas for how to tackle a similar subject. Okay, so we're here on the beach at Mulroog. I'm with my good pal, Reuben. Hey, Rubes. Reuben, he doesn't look at me when I talk to him, I don't know why. And there's nobody here but myself, which isn't surprising because, as you can hear, well, I hope you can't hear too badly, but the wind is ferocious today. I hope that's just my ears magnifying the windy noise, you know? I don't know, because I've got my mics in my phone, the furry mice or dead cats or whatever they're called, in place. So I'm hoping the wind noise is cut down a little bit. I thought I might try this scene of the sea coming in. Do you see the way we've got that white glare of the sun on the sea? God, I don't know what to do about that, but I'm thinking I might be able to do it with a dry brush technique. So I'm going to give it a go. Yeah. What if I did the blue like really dark just next to it? And then a few bits of white gel pen at the very shoreline, or more gel pen. I don't have a masking fluid pen here, which might be a good solution because I've used that before and it works really well. Anyway, I better get on with it and we'll see how it goes.
The beach is always full of little animals that are great for sketching. There's my bike. I've got my trusty cap on. So I'm well protected against the wind and the sun, and I'm starting off with my fountain pen, my Fude fountain pen in a dark blue ink, and I'm trying to capture those stones in the shallow surf right at the shoreline. And because they're wet, they've got a glimmering top side, so the highlight is clear on the top of each of these rocks, and I am trying to capture that by leaving a little patch of untouched paper, so a little patch of white on the top of each of these little stones or little rocks that are in the white surf. Also, the contrast is made greater by the fact that they're surrounded by the white bubbling surf all around. Here's the line of frothy surf running along the shore, and once again I am scribbling in with my dark blue ink. It's Frida Sketch Ink by Roaring Klingner, and I'm using it because I don't want to do the rocks in a light grey. You wouldn't get that silhouette effect. So the first thing I do is ask myself not what colour are the rocks, but what colour do they appear. So silhouetted against the strong evening sunlight, they do appear, well, pretty black actually, which is all the better for making the highlights at the top of each of the rocks really stand out against the white foaming surf. Using different positions of my nib to get wider and skinnier lines, so you can see the way I twist and turn it. Using it with the nib turned to the back, it gives me a very fine line. Well, I seem to run out of ink so often once I've just started. So I'm filling up my pen here. You twist the black bit at the top of the converter inside the barrel of the pen until the inner black bit is all the way down to the bottom, and then you shove it into your little vial of ink, ensuring that the business end of the pen, will say, is completely submerged, and then you twist in the opposite direction and you take it out of the ink bottle that you have with you and you give it a wipe with a bit of absorbent paper, put the barrel back on, and you're back in action. Just remember that the pen always tends to flood a little bit when it's first used after filling, so that's when I take the opportunity to draw something that requires a very dense black kind of a look. So even if my ink is brown or dark blue, it's going to look black for the first few scribbles after refilling it. The shapes of the individual rocks doesn't really matter too much. The important thing to remember is make them very random. Don't fall into the trap of trying to make them all kind of patterny and matchy, because that just doesn't happen in nature. So it'll look a lot more realistic if you make them quite different from each other. A little bit jagged is good too.
Wow, this is so beautiful. We've got this kind of a thing. But you have to choose your crushing moment. You can't just you can't do them all. You can't do them all. This is a dynamic situation, and it's got lots going on. These stones are all kind of painted dark blue with my pen because they're silhouetted against the bright sun of the evening. So while that ink's drying, I'm going to draw some stones in the foreground that aren't quite so silhouetted because they're not in the glare of the sun on the surf.
My aim is to paint the coloured bits of each of those rocks on the shore in a slightly lighter grey than the rocks that are in the surf, which are really caught in the sunlight. I wish I knew what's causing that swooshing sound, but it doesn't go on forever. I'm using the fine side of my nib to capture the look of the absolute mess of pebbles and rocks that are on the shore. This beach doesn't have any sand really, it's just rocks. They're kind of uneven as well, but you can get quite a good impression of them by just drawing them all one after the other. Now it's time to put on the colour for the sea, and if you've watched my other videos you'll know that if I want a really smooth finish I put on some clear water onto the area that I'm going to paint, and then I put on my wash of colour. And in this case we've got phthalo green mixed with Payne's grey, which is kind of my go-to mix when it comes to the sea around these parts. It's a beautiful muted dark greeny blue, but it's not the aqua greeny blue of the tropics, and it's not the bluey blue of some of the summer sea that you get around the place. Anyway, I've left that big gap in the middle, which is where the sun is hitting the sea and making it super glistening and shimmery, and I'm trying to bring my brush strokes right up to the shimmery bit as dark as possible. And I guess I still kind of feel a little bit should be a little bit drier, but as I referred to earlier, I don't really know how to do a dry brush technique. Well, that's not quite true. I have done it, but I haven't done it for a while, put it that way. So maybe I'm taking a bit of a lazy way out. Now, as for the breaking waves, the curly bits, if you darken underneath them quite a lot, that can have a good effect, because after all, the curling over bits of each of the waves cast their own shadow as well. So it makes the colour band underneath them a little bit darker too. I'm doing something similar along the entire length. But again, you have to kind of watch what you're doing, because you can look at a breaker and 1 second it's curling over and the next second it's disappeared and it's become flat surf. I'm starting to add little ripples on the surface of the water. It's a very windy day, so the water is quite choppy, but you'll find that the horizontal strokes close to the shore are much bigger and bolder than the ones further away from the shore. It doesn't take me too long to realise that my rigger brush will do a better job of this than my squirrel mop, which has a beautiful point but not quite fine enough. Meanwhile, I'm going to use it for the bits of water, the bits of vertical water under the curling bits, very close to the shore. And at this point they become much lighter and, I suppose, much more transparent. And for that I'm using a mix of yellow and sap green and a tiny bit of Payne's grey too. My plan is to make these little ripples really quite dark, and then when they're dry I want to add a bit of white gel pen along the top side of each of those dark ripples, because I can see the sun catching on the top surface of them. So a more planning sort of an artist and a more, let's say, rigorous sort of an artist would probably have masked off little strips above each of the dark little ripples that they intend to do. But I didn't think it through, as I'm inclined not to. As you can see, I've moved on to my rigger brush here, which has got a super thin brush, and I really find it very, very good for things like ripples, because sometimes no matter how pointy your lovely round brush is, it just has to be that very, very fine tip of a rigger brush. This rigger is from Rosemary & Co, and it's in the travel brush range, and so is the squirrel mop that you saw a minute ago. That's also in the travel brush range because, well, I'm always out when I'm doing my little bits of urban sketching, or even on the couch at home, but I still want to be able to use a brush that's kept in really, really good condition, because I'm not usually painting at my studio desk. So I'm deepening up that little bit of dark under those curling over waves at the very near shore side. See, look, the way I'm darkening up just under the curly bit. So that's the same shot as a minute ago, just slowed down a little bit. But it makes such a difference. It's just, I don't know, makes it look realistic. And then when that's completely dry, you'll see me put a little skein of white surf through the underside of the curling over waves with my white gel pen. It kind of fell off camera here, but I'm putting a wash of a light dilute Payne's grey on top of the rocks. Nice clean grey. Well, these lovely ladies came down for a swim, and brave though they were to venture into the drink, I couldn't resist making a bit of a silly little version of their few minutes of fun. Braver ladies than I was, and they seemed to have a really lovely time. So fair play to them. But back to the task at hand, and I've put a couple of layers of unmixed Payne's grey on the rocks on the shore, and my next task is to try and get the look of those busy rocks and pebbles on the shore, as well as showing that the sun is picking up the top sides of those bigger rocks closer to the foreground. With my dark brown Diatramentus document brown ink, I am scribbling in the band of seaweed that lies at the very bottom of the page, so at the very front of the little scene. I do love sketching seaweed because, well, I get a lot of chances to do it. The seashore around here is always covered in seaweed, and there seems to be an endless supply. So I've put on the scribbly bits with my pen, and now I'm going over it with a mix of burnt sienna and burnt umber to get that rich orangey brown look of the seaweed. It also makes a really nice contrast with the cold pale grey colour of the pebbles. I figured after that I would deepen up the base of some of those rocks, just to show again that the sun is shining on the rocks. And I'm using the skinny side of my nib as well to fill in a lot of those rocks in the foreground. Putting in loads and loads of rocks on a beach like that is a bit like when you put loads of stones on a castle front or a load of bricks in a house. You have to ask yourself, well, do I put them all in or just a few, or what do I do? Well, I found that I just put in as many as I had the patience to do, because I figured, well, that was the look of it. It was a kind of a busy foreground. Filling in all those little bits of pebbles, little bits of dark, and you can sort of see at this stage how I tried to make those stones look silhouetted in the surf. So remember, with watercolour, if you want to make something look bright and light, you make whatever's around it, you make it look really dark. And the darker you make whatever lies around it, the lighter and brighter the area that you want to leave white is. Filling in all those little bits. So the only reason I'm showing you all of this literally step by step is in case you want to sketch along with this video, so you're not missing any bits of detail. I did somehow manage to miss little bits of the page when I was doing the filming, but there was a lot of wind, so it was kind of tricky to do that. More rocks, fitting them all in. I'm putting a little dab of darker colour, grey, Payne's grey, at the bottom of each of these pebbles. And my idea is not to leave them dark like that, but to maybe lift the colour a little bit so that they're kind of darker than the rocks around them, to show that they're in shadow, but not like super dark. And I figured that the paint is going to lighten up as it dries anyway, which it tends to do. And I can always lift it with a clean, dryish brush if I think I've gone too heavy on it. It's a little bit tedious popping in all the blobs of darker colour, but, you know, I'm on the beach. I'm having a lovely afternoon. It's a gorgeous day. I'm in the sunshine, and even though it's super windy, I wouldn't be anywhere else than here on the shore with my paints and my brushes and my little sketch. Now I'm adding a little bit more seaweed that's right on the border between the water and the rocks. You have to be kind of careful at this stage though, because the tide has started to change a lot. It's beginning to go out a good bit. So you have to make sure you don't turn around and put something in that is dramatically different than what you have seen when you started. Using my black ink to go over some of those tiny little rocks in the surf to really make them stand out against the bright sun of the sky. Well, just as I'm enjoying the sunshine and the sea and the wind and all the rest of it, doesn't a gust of wind come and snatch my baseball cap and fling it to the boulders far, far away. So I retrieved it and got back to work. You can see that those little blobs of darker paint at the base of each of those little pebbles, they really, really lightened as they dried. So just bear that in mind. It takes a bit of kind of practice to get used to that, but it is very much a thing that you have to kind of predict, or at least be aware that it's going to happen. Everything's dry now, and it's time to add these little bits of white gel pen on the tops of some of those waves. Now you have to make sure your white gel pen is working well, or it won't give the good strong effect that you want. I always try to make sure I have at least 2 white gel pens in my sketching kit, because there's always a chance that one of them has started to waste out a little bit, and for me it's very important to have a really good strong white line in my white gel pen, because I use it for correcting mistakes, but also for adding little layers of white like you see here.
think the trick is to put the strips of white on top of the bands of dark, but I'm not sure. And to give a couple of layers to the spots of white froth.
It's time to do the sky, and I've put a clean layer of transparent water with no colour on the surface where I want to put the blue, so that when I put the paint on, it goes on really, really smoothly and evenly, and you don't end up with any visible brush strokes that can spoil the look of a nice smooth sky. I've used phthalo blue here, but really the choice of colour for the sky is kind of up to you. I've used lots of different colours over the years for skies. While it's still wet, I'm adding an extra little layer at the top, but make sure you only do that when it's fresh and wet, otherwise you'll end up with cauliflowers and blotchy bits, which I think are kind of cute, but you might not want them. At this point I got a little bit sloppy with the camera work, so most of this hill was off camera, well, for a bit anyway. But I'm choosing a mixture of mineral violet and a little bit of Payne's grey perhaps for the hill in the background. We're on to the finishing touches now. A couple of seagulls and some black ink to make those silhouetted rocks really punchy in the white froth. I always put the little bit of grass on the far side of the shore on last. It shows up quite well, even if you've got a purpley hill behind it. It's time to add some finishing touches on the seaweed. A little bit of Frida dark blue ink, just to give a bit of definition to the seaweed. I've been here for about an hour and I'm ready to go home now. Lovely, lovely afternoon spent capturing the shimmering sun on the sea. I hope you've enjoyed coming with me to the beach today and sharing with me some of my little tips on how to capture the shimmering sea in watercolour. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy watching sketching videos and picking up tips that you can apply to your own sketches. Happy sketching and see you next time.